recording later. I want to welcome everybody to our new semester. I hope you had a nice summer. I hope you had a nice month of Tishrei. This week's class is dedicated by Anne. Is it Lalo or Lalo?
No, Lalo.
Lalo. By Anne Lalo, in honor of the IDF and the heroes who we lost fighting for the survival of the Jewish people in Israel. We should keep praying for the release of the hostages. Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you, Anne. It's also sponsored by Jeff and Lori Goldschin in honor of the start of the new Lunch and Learn semester, and a thank you to the staff at Chabad and the Academy. I'd also like to dedicate this class in the memory of Tony Glassman, who passed away last week. Donna's son passed away. Donna, our condolences from all of us, from the entire community. And you should only find strength, and your son and your daughter in the heavenly world should watch over you and be with you, and you should feel their presence every single day. I left by your places. You have the brochure for the upcoming fall semester. There's a lot of classes and lectures and programs coming your way. One of the feature lectures we have is Master the Flow of Time with Rabbi Dr. Label Wolf, a Kabbalist from Australia, who will be joining us, and that will be on Monday, November 18th at 8 p.m. Do make reservations in advance for that. There's also a course starting this evening with Rabbi Levine called Soul Life. If you're interested in the soul and the afterlife and the heavenly world and reincarnation and resurrection, all of these subjects, the course starts tonight at 8 p.m. You're all welcome to join us. The classes, we encourage everyone that lives in the area to come in person. If we have to set up more chairs, we will. It's full today, which is beautiful. We'll pack it in for as many as we can fit possibly in. So those that are on Zoom, I hear there's only you're getting the audio, you're not getting the video now. It's working? Oh, give Shmuley a hand, everybody. But if you do live nearby, join us live. The benefit of coming live is the following. Number one, there's cookies and coffee before class. Number two, there's lunch after class. We're not delivering lunch to your homes. Your lunch is only for those that come here, and the lunch today is catered by Pizza Nosh. Now, if that doesn't get you here, I don't know what will. It's also great to see faces, to see you in person. However, the Zoom will continue for those that are out of the area, out of the community, in other states, in other countries, and all different continents throughout the world. We welcome you to our class. It's also available on Facebook Live, and then tomorrow it gets put on YouTube Live, so if you ever miss a class, a recording of it can be found. If someone could find Ron a seat, you got a seat for Ron? Welcome, Ron. So let's begin. I begin with a story. It's a parable. You may have heard me tell this parable years ago. I'm going to tell it to you again because it's a great opening story. There was a Poritz. A Poritz was a squire, a mayor-like of a city. But in the days back then, the mayor actually owned the city, and you went to pay rent to him. So anyone that lived in the city would have to come and pay rent. And this poor Jew would have to put together whatever amount of money he would need to come up with a month. It was always hard. He would scrape it together and make his way to the Poritz's home, and he would deliver the rent money directly to the Poritz. One time he comes to the Poritz's home, and the Poritz is eating breakfast. And it looks so good. It smells so good. And the Poritz is really enjoying it. It's this delicious mushroom omelet. And he's digging into it, and he's eating, and the poor Jew is looking, and he's so jealous. Like, why can't he have this? Why can't he have this luxury? Why can't he have this breakfast? He's making his way home, and he comes into his house, and he tells his sweet wife, Yentl, in this house, I'm the Poritz. I may not be the Poritz of the town, but in this house, I'm the Poritz. And I would like a mushroom omelet. So Yentl says, my dear sweet husband, there would be nothing greater joy than I would have than to make you a mushroom omelet. You are indeed the Poritz of the home. But there's a problem. We have no eggs, and we have no money to buy eggs. So he says, so substitute. Find something else, but I want a mushroom omelet. Okay. But we have no flour. So substitute. Okay, but we have no eggs, no flour, no ingredients, no salt, no pepper. We don't have anything. Substitute. And so Yentl goes to the kitchen and she does her magic. And she puts together, quote unquote, her mushroom omelet. And she serves it to her dear husband sitting by a broken table in this house that he's the poritz. And he takes a spoonful of it, a forkful of it, and he spits it out. And he says, "Feh! I don't know why the poritz likes mushroom omelets." Shmuley, we're getting some of the sound. Could you just, yeah, that's okay. Now, why do I open with this story? My goal in teaching is to present to you all the ingredients, the original ingredients, without substitutes. I present to you the Torah, the verses of the Torah in its original version, with all the classic commentaries, and I present it to you with the hope that you appreciate, that you enjoy it, and with the hope that you take and you incorporate it, some of it into your life. But what we have found over the decades, and we have seen this throughout the Jewish world, is if we attempt to substitute, if we attempt to take the real ingredients out of Judaism and substitute it for other ingredients, and we present it to people, they spit it out because there's nothing authentic there. And then they wonder, why did their grandparents risk their lives for Judaism when it doesn't taste like anything? And so the attempt here is, I present it to you from its original classic versions. Now I know in this room and throughout the audience, throughout the world that's watching, we're all in various different levels of observance. We're all raised differently. So this is not about each one competing in any type of way. It's about each of us growing in some type of way. Each of us taking and incorporating what we can, where we can in life, and trying to enhance our life with the beauty of Judaism. One more story. The story of a shtetl, a town. And the town had this one tower that was the highlight of the city. And this tower had a clock at the top of the tower. And every day as everyone went to work, they would take their timepieces out and they would set their time based on the city town clock. And they would go to work. They would go the next day, make sure their timepiece had the right time by checking the time on the town clock. But one day someone came to the city council and said to the city council, "I don't understand why the clock has to be on the top of the tower. We all have to strain our necks every time we pass to see the time. Why can't we take the clock and bring it to the bottom of the tower so that when we pass by, we don't have to strain our necks? It's right there." No one can find any reason why not to do that, so at a 5-0 vote of the city council, they hired a company to take the clock from the top of the tower to bring it to the bottom of the tower. And no one had to strain their necks anymore. And 2 weeks went by, and the clock was broken. Why? Because as each person passed by and took out their town piece, they looked at the time that they had, and they looked at the time that the town clock had, and they moved the dials of the town clock, because the town clock must have been wrong because they had a different time on their timepiece. The next person came and moved it again, and the next person, and after 2 weeks, the handles were completely broken. And so the city council met together in an emergency session and they voted to put the clock to the top of the tower. In many ways, that's what we have done, is we take the beauty of the Torah, of the mitzvot, and we bring it down to the bottom of the tower because maybe it's too difficult, maybe it's too inconvenient, maybe it's outdated. And so we want to bring it and make it easier for us. And we change this and we change that and we change that, and what do we find then? It breaks. It doesn't work. And when we try to pass it on to the next generation and the next generation, it's broken. Let's keep the clock on the top of the tower. Let's strain our necks a little bit. Let's look up every time. Whatever we can possibly incorporate into our lives, let's take. But if we have to strain a little bit to look up, it's good. It's worthwhile. The clock remains on the top of the tower. We're going to be studying this semester chapter 14 of the book of Deuteronomy. The book of Deuteronomy is the fifth of the 5 books of the Bible. So yes, we have made it through, over the past 31 years, 4 1/4 of the books. The 5th book is taking us a long time. I estimate we'll finish it in about 20 more years. So then on our 50th anniversary of the class, we're going to start from the book of Genesis again. In Hebrew, the 5th book is called the book of Devarim, which means words. In Latin, it's called Deuteronomy. It's a hard word to spell, but I've gotten used to it. The name of the portion that we're studying of chapter 14 is called Re'eh. That's the name of the portion. Now this entire book, this entire 5th book, if you weren't here the last 30 years, it's okay. You'll fit right in as we begin a new chapter each time, so don't worry about it. The entire book is a powerful address by Moses given days before his passing. Let me set the scene for you. You know the story of Moses because you watched the movie The 10 Commandments. Maybe you went to Hebrew school, maybe you studied some of the text. But Moses was selected by God to go to Pharaoh, take the Jewish people out of Egypt. He does so. He's 80 years old at the time. He becomes the leader of the Jewish people. He will then take them out of Egypt through the story of the 10 plagues and the story of the splitting of the sea. And then they'll wander in the wilderness a little bit, making their way to Mount Sinai for the revelation of Sinai and the giving of the 10 Commandments. And then there's going to be some revolution, some revolts in the wilderness. You're going to have the episode of the spies, the episodes of the golden calf, complaints about water, complaints about food. There's a lot of complaining that went on for 40 years. Our grandparents were great kvetchers. They kvetched a lot. They complained a lot. They were also very faithful people. So although the Torah is very honest with us and tells us their defaults, the things that they did wrong, they've also did a lot right. And for 40 years they wander in the wilderness, and now they're about to enter the promised land after a 40-year detour. And God tells Moses, you will not be the leader that will take them into the land of Israel. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, another time as to why Moses didn't merit, what that means to us, but that's not for today. Moses is now coming to his last days. He's already selected the next leader. God has told him who it's going to be. It's going to be his student, Joshua, who will lead the Jewish people into the wilderness. That's the scene. These are days before his passing. And what he delivers here is a mission statement to the Jewish people. It's his final plea for them to keep the torch of Judaism aflame and see that it gets passed along from one generation to the next generation. That's what's on Moses' mind. In this book, the book of Deuteronomy, Moses will review some of the laws that we already covered in the first 4 books. He'll teach them an approximate amount of 70 laws that have not yet been discussed in the prior 4 books. He'll recount for them the history of their challenges, of their rebellions experienced during the 40 years, so as to learn what not to do in the future. He'll talk about their lows and he'll talk about their highs. Because Moses understood that once they crossed over the Jordan, life was going to be very different for them. The people would no longer see God's constant presence and daily miracles as they had in the wilderness. Now they're going to have to plow. Now they're going to have to plant. Now they're going to have to harvest. They would have to establish courts and governments. They would have to forge social relationships and means to provide for and protect the needy and the helpless. They're going to have to build a society. They're going to need strong faith. They're going to need self-discipline to avoid the temptations of the pagan neighbors and the ways of life of the countries and nations around them. They're coming into a Canaanite nation. They're going to be warned over and over, don't learn from the ways of the Canaanites. They're going to need to avoid false prophets. They're going to need to avoid idol worship. They would need to be strong. They would need to be resolute. They would need to be determined. So imagine you needed to write an address that needed to inspire not just the people for the next month, Not just for the next year, not just for the next decade, not just for the next century, but for eternity. You have to write that speech of how you inspire your children and your grandchildren to pass something along that has to live on forever. That's the book of Deuteronomy. Thus, Deuteronomy is not really just a book of review. It's not a summary. A review Moses did all the time. Teachings he did all the time. But this was different. This was, I would call it, his last will and testament. Not just to the generation standing in front of him, but to each and every single one of us. So imagine Moses is talking to you days before his passing, saying, this is what I want you to know as to what Judaism means, what your mission statement is, what does it mean to be a chosen people, what exactly are we supposed to do to be chosen. It was after he gave this address that God instructs him to record it word for word, and for his address to be included in the Torah as the fifth of now the 5 books of Moses, so that it is studied and it is kept eternally amongst the Jewish people. Now, the book of Deuteronomy has also been called by another name in Hebrew called Mishnah Torah. Loosely translated, it means the repetition of the law. That's a poor English translation. Because although there are parts of Deuteronomy that are repeated, as I mentioned, there are parts of Deuteronomy that are new. That was not a repetition of anything before. So why are we calling it by this word Mishnah Torah? It comes from that same explanation of why we called it Devarim, which I said in Hebrew means words, because it's a book of speeches. It's a book of sermons given by one man at a critical time in his life. It is the book that needs to be not repeated. Not that it means it's a repetition, but it's a book that needs repeating over and over and over again. Which means when we want to teach our children all of Judaism, focus on the teachings of this book. When the world asks us, what does Judaism mean? The best answer is study the book of Deuteronomy. It's the book that should be repeated by us over and over. We say in the Shema, V'shinantam levanecha, you shall teach this to your children. It's referencing, of course, all of Torah, but specifically this final book. In this address, he links all the details of the laws of history into this single overarching vision. He teaches them what it means to be an Am Kadosh. What does it mean to be a holy people? It's more than just words. What does it mean? Practically speaking, what does it mean? It's all found in the book of Deuteronomy. So I would say in the book of Deuteronomy, Moses gives the people the why. All the whys. What does it mean that you're God's people? What does it mean that God loves you? What does it mean that you're God's children? What are all these phrases? What does it really mean? And how do we live that out? It's interesting, in the last month of Moses' life, he ceased all the other roles that he had. Moses was the liberator, right? He was the miracle worker, the story of Moses and his staff. He was the redeemer. He was their leader, right? In the last days of his life, he became what we call him today. We call him Moshe Rabbeinu. Ever heard that word? What does Rabbeinu mean? Our teacher, our rabbi. Which means all the other titles were great. And that's, of course, highlights when you think about the life of Moses and all the miracles he performed in the Exodus and all that. But ultimately, what do we remember him for? For being our teacher. It was the first instance in history of a leadership type in which Jews have excelled, which is to be a leader by being a teacher. Moses surely knew that some of his great achievements would not last forever. The people that he had rescued only one day would suffer exile and persecution again. There will be other pharaohs that will come in history again. And the next time they wouldn't have a Moses with a staff that could do all these miracles for them. So he planted a vision in their minds. He planted, I would say, hope in their hearts. A discipline in their deeds and strength in their souls that would never fade. And he did that by becoming an educator. When we think of Jewish leadership, let's contrast the Torah perspective on kings and teachers. Because when you think of a leader, you tend to think of a king. And yet, the Torah frowns upon royalty. It says if you're going to, it's almost like if you insist, you can have a king. But if you're going to have a king, the king can't do this, the king can't do this, the king is just a human being, the king has to keep the Torah as well. It frowns upon kingship. When someone has authority over you, you are diminished by them because they have authority over you. You're made smaller. When someone teaches you, you become greater. Your wisdom becomes more. The teacher doesn't take away anything from you. The teacher only adds. And so, one of the beauties of the book of Deuteronomy is it shows the value, and this has been this way throughout all of Jewish history, of leadership by being a teacher. If you think a moment in the Hasidic movement, right? Who is the leader of every Hasidic movement? It's called the Rebbe, right? Chabad has the Rebbes, the Satmar has their Rebbes, everyone has the Rebbe, the Hasidic Rebbe. I grew up in a Chabad family. The Lubavitcher Rebbe was my Rebbe, he still is my Rebbe. It's interesting. Whatever we wanted to do in life, we wrote a note to the Rebbe. Should we do this? Should we do this? Should we do this career? Should we do this? Should I study this? We rely so much on the Rebbe. And the Rebbe would often use ourselves, which means to find the answer within ourselves, to guide us to the right answer. But it's interesting. He had so much authority over us, and yet he had no authority over us. He had no police force. He never forced us to do anything. He would teach. He would inspire. And now there are millions upon millions throughout the world that will study his teachings. The leader as a teacher, Moses modeled that for us, is that the ultimate leadership in Judaism is the one who teaches. Not the governors, not the mayors, not the ones that have power, but the ones that teach, the ones that inspire. Chapter 14. I'm going to just, for the benefit of those that are in the Zoom world and the Facebook world and the YouTube world, I'm going to ask that questions inside the classroom here be reserved for after the formal class. Because those watching it can't hear your questions and then they're not going to know what's going on. So if possible, if when I'm teaching something you have a question, if you want to just jot it down, when I close the formal recording part of it, then I'll take questions in the room, okay? If it's something urgent, just pick up your hand and we'll break the rules for you. Now, you have those at home, you don't have the sheets that we have over here, but we're not going to cover too much, so it's going to be just a few words today. I'm going to read to you the first verse. Okay, those of you that have the sheets, it's chapter 14. We're not getting off the first verse today. So let me just read it to you for the benefit of those watching on Zoom. Banim atem la Hashem Elokeichem. Again, this is Moses speaking to the Jewish people. This is literally days, just a few days before his passing. And he says to them, you are children of God. Banim, children. Atem la Hashem Elokeichem, to God your God. And then look what he immediately goes into, which is a strange bringing these two subjects together in the same one verse. Loisis goidedu, don't cut yourself. V'loisasimu karcha, don't make any boldness. Bein einechem, between your eyes. Lameis, for the dead. What's going on? What is he talking about? So let's start. First, he says you are God's children. Now I want you to think of those words and think of the messages contained right there. You're not just his creations. He's not just your creator. You're not his robots. He didn't create all of you to be a little robot doing what he programmed you to do. That's perhaps the sun and the moon and the stars and everything else that he talks about in the 6 days of creation, where he creates, quote unquote, robots. Natural things that are built in, and that's the way they're going to be. The sun doesn't have the ability to change its mind. The sun doesn't have the ability to do anything different than what it was created to do. But when it comes to this last creation, the creation of the human being, there's something new, there's something unique, there's something different. There's free choice. You have an ability to make a decision. The relationship, says Moses to the Jewish people, that you have is that you're God's children. You're not his toys. You're not only his servants, but you're his children. There's various different relationships that we talk about between us and God. There's relationships at Sinai. What do we call Sinai revelation? A marriage, husband and wife relationship. There's so many times we call God our king, so we're servants to the king. Here Moses is talking about a different part of the relationship of being God's child. A relationship doesn't get stronger than that. It denotes this bond. It denotes this connection, this relationship, because a child can always reach out to a father. And the father will always hear the cries of a child. So the first thing is Moses saying is, understand you have this unique relationship with God. At the same time, it denotes a responsibility. You're part of a family. And you have a reputation to keep up. Your father is counting on you to help you run the family business. The family business is the business of morality. The family business is the business of ethics. The family business is the business of seeing that the world is a blessed world. For whatever strange reason, God wants help in changing this world. He tries it for the first 2,000 years without any assistance. What do I mean without any assistance? In the era of from Adam until Abraham, everyone worshiped God how you pleased, how you wanted. And what do we find for 2,000 years? Constantly veering off course, constantly finding your ways into evil ways. Free choice left without any other human influence, just continuously turned evil until God had to destroy the world, as we studied in last week's Torah portion, the portion of Noah. And then from Noah to the next 10 generations again, until Abraham comes along. What's different about Abraham? What was different about Abraham than anyone that came before him? Is that he lobbied for goodness. He went door knocking, so to say, for goodness. He tried to encourage others to change their ways. No one did that before. Noah was a righteous man, but Noah didn't try to change anyone's mind. Abraham is the first. And this is a new model. You're part of the business. You're part of the family business. Change the world for the better. It also denotes that there's a responsibility of a father to educate children and therefore to watch over his children, to guide his children. So Moses is telling the Jewish people that God will guide you, that there will be divine providence in your lives. God's not just going to let you be. He's going to be with you. We just finished the high holidays not too long ago. What's some of the most, of all the prayers that we say? Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. This year Yom Kippur we didn't say it too often because it was Shabbat. But there's the prayer called Avinu Malkeinu. It was written by Rabbi Akiva, made famous by Barbara Streisand. Avinu Malkeinu. What does Avinu Malkeinu mean? Avinu, our father, Malkeinu, our king. And then we list, Rabbi Akiva, who wrote this prayer, lists all the different things that we're pleading for. Right? One after the next after the next. Not just the verse of the song. The prayer goes on for so many requests. We open it with Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. We have a dual relationship. Yes, He's our King. He's our God. He's our Creator. We are your servants. All that's true. But He's also our Father. So just think for yourself if you're appealing to someone with authority for something you need in your life. What type of prayer comes to mind? You don't have to answer, just think. What words come to mind? Let's just pick a judge. You're at a case. And your life is on the line. And the judge says, do you have anything to say? Think how you prepare the words you're going to say. King. Now do the same exact thing, but the person you're talking to is your father. It's a very different plea. It's a very different ask. Because to a father, it's ta, papa, daddy, whatever you call him. I know I did wrong. I know I don't deserve, but you're my father. And that is something that a father hears. The voice, the tone, the plea of a child. I often tell this parable of a kid. I don't know if any of you have ever had this experience of having a parent as your teacher. To have your father, your mother as your teacher in school. Anyone in the room have that? Well, it's a tough place to be. It's very hard. It's very hard on the teacher, very hard on the student. Because the teacher is always thinking at all times, I don't want the other students to think that I'm showing favoritism to my child. So even if they're not making a decision at that moment, in the back of their mind, they're always on guard that no one should think that they're showing favoritism to their child. So what happens is they overcompensate for it and they're overly strict on the kid so that no one should accuse them of showing favoritism. Kids that have parents or teachers have a very difficult time in school. Very, very hard. So there was this kid that had his 5th grade teacher was his father. And his father just wouldn't, and the moment he did anything, his father would kick him out of class, go to the principal's office, assignments. It was miserable. He was having such a hard time. But his father was always a nice guy. He loved his father. And here his father is just making his life miserable. And he doesn't know what to do. So he came up with this simple thing. One night, when he was home, he knocks on his father's bedroom door. His father comes to the door. Yes. He says, Dad, I have a favor to ask. Sure, anything. Can you speak to my 5th grade teacher and tell him not to be so hard on me? That's Avinu Malkeinu. Yeah. Quick.
It happens all the time in business. The
Yeah.
exact same phenomenology. When the person is the head of the business and they have a child working for them,
Same.
the same force,
Same.
the same dynamics
Right.
are in play.
Very good. Avinu Malkeinu. So Moses opens this chapter. Banim atem la'Hashem Elokechem. Remember that you're children. And that therefore what? Well, it can go in so many different directions, but right now in chapter 14, he's going to take it uniquely into one direction. Since you carry that special relationship with God, I don't want you, he says, cutting yourselves for the dead. What does that mean? In many religions, especially in pagan cultures, death brought about a whole slew of practices that God forbids for the Jewish people. And these included cutting oneself rather severely, mutilation, lots of blood, and you still see that today in some cultures, where mourning, being in sadness, is connected to letting blood spill from your own body, to cutting yourself with blades, so that you bring about pain, so that you feel the mourning. If death is permanent, and if there is no belief in a heavenly world, and there's no belief in an afterlife, then the mourning and sense of loss from death is indeed unbearable. Because there's no tomorrow. There's no more connection. This person that I loved so much, their existence came to an end. And having that finality can result in some very dangerous self-harm behavior. Judaism believes in a period of mourning. There is sadness. But life goes on. And the relationship with the deceased carries on. It doesn't end upon death. It's transitioned. We believe in heaven. We believe in a soul. We believe in an afterlife. We believe in the resurrection of the dead. We believe in a godly purpose for living, which means that every day of life has purpose, and when God determines that a soul is to come back to Him, that too has purpose. We may not like it. We may protest it. We can cry about it. But our faith tells us that this too had purpose. And so when God so determines the end of life, yes, we're sad, and so we sit shiva, and we tear not our skin, our garment. We make a cut, we make a tear, because our hearts are broken. But don't hurt yourselves. Limit it to shiva, to sadness, to crying, but then get up. Go back into the world. Don't make it a permanent thing. Don't make it a permanent scar on the body. Don't make it a permanent scar on the mind. Don't make it a permanent scar on your soul. This is such an important teaching of Moses to all of us, of how we carry on upon tragedy, how we carry on upon the passing of a loved one. Jewish people are going to go through history, and guess what? It's not going to be an easy history. They're going to suffer tremendously. And what Moses is instilling within them is that it's not over here on earth. There's a continuation, there's a purpose, there's a mission, there's something there. You're able to live this way when you truly believe that you're God's children, that He cares, that He sees. And that's why Moses puts it in the very same verse. If God is your Father, He cares about you. That He sees what you're going through, that He knows what you're going through. Not only do we understand the ways of our Father, but knowing that He's our loving Father, that He cares about us, allows us to believe that although it hurts, it's going to be okay. I'm going to conclude with a story I told over in shul, I think it was 2 weeks ago, so those of you that were there, forgive me for repeating something, but it's worth repeating at this theme, and then we'll continue on this same subject next week, and then move on. I'll briefly tell you afterwards what we're going to be covering. In June of 2022, there was a young dentist by the name of Dr. Ruvain Rosenkrantz that passed away suddenly in his 40s. At his funeral, his father, Saul Rosenkrantz, spoke about his son's many accomplishments during his relatively short life. Trying unsuccessfully to hold it together, as he's giving this eulogy, he cries out that it's not natural for a parent to be at a child's funeral. How does one accept this? You expect to bury grandparents. You expect after 120 years to bury your parents. But you don't expect to bury a child. And it's a different pain. It's a very different pain. And so he's asking the people at the funeral, how do I deal with this? And then he answered his own question by telling the following story. There was once a man, his name was Shammai. Shammai owned an art gallery. And one day Shammai approached this very wealthy man, we'll call him Gavriel. And he told Gavriel, you have this beautiful house filled with art. I want you to take a look at my art gallery because maybe I have some art that you would like to purchase. Gavriel says to Shammai, no. I buy only top stuff. You wouldn't carry in your gallery anything that belongs in my home. Trust me. And he kept on nudging him every time he saw him. Just come visit. Maybe you'll see something you like. And each time he passed it off by saying, I buy only the finest art from the top artists out there. You wouldn't have anything that I would like. But he nudged, and finally Gavriel said to Shammai, fine, I'll come. And he came to the art gallery, took a walk around, went room to room, and he said, as I expected, very nice, but nothing here that I really have interest in. But thank you for showing it to me. He says, no, but I have one more piece that I don't even keep out in the gallery. I have it just in this private chamber that I'd like to show you. It's a tapestry. It's a magnificent tapestry. So he says, all right, let's see it. And he comes in and he sees this tapestry laid out, and it looked so ugly. It just made no sense. The colors made no sense. The materials made no sense. And he couldn't hold it back. And he says, it's ugly. Why would you even show this to me? He says, let me show you one more thing. And then he turned it upside down. He says, you were looking from the tapestry from the back. From the back, the tapestry doesn't look like anything. But now look at it from the front. And indeed, it was magnificent. It was splendid. The most beautiful of colors and materials coming together. And he said, I have to buy this. You name your price, but this belongs in my house. Saul Rosencrantz is saying this at his son's funeral. He says, as I stand here today, this tragedy is too hard to understand. But I know that after my time in this earth is up, and I come to the heavenly world, God will turn the tapestry over, and I'll be able to see how it all made sense. Where in this world, we're seeing it all from the back end of the tapestry, and it doesn't make sense, and it hurts so bad. And we see so many bad things happening to good people, and we cry out. But our faith tells us that there's another side to the tapestry that we don't see in the here and now, but we believe it's there. And in that side of the tapestry, everything makes sense, and everything is from the good, and all the colors are beautiful. As Jews, we know that the essence of a person is not their physical body, but it's their spiritual soul. Our soul, what we call neshama. In this physical world, we only see the back of things, so we are disheartened, we're confused. In reality, God has built a beautiful world. And one day, when he turns things around, we'll recognize how stunning of a world it indeed was. And therefore, we can't be excessive in mourning when there is death. Because one day, it will make sense. That takes faith. That takes belief that you are God's children, and that God loves you, and God cares for you, and God is there with you. Next week, we'll continue a little bit on this theme, and then we're going to move into where God openly says to us in chapter 14 through Moses that we are his chosen people. And so we're going to spend some time understanding what exactly those words mean. How are those words not arrogant if someone says, we are the chosen people? How are we to define it for ourselves and then define it for the world? So we'll be speaking a little bit about the chosen people. Then Moses is going to talk to us about kosher. What does it mean to keep kosher? What is kosher? What animals are kosher? We're going to have a great deal of time to spend on studying the subject of kosher together. For those out there in Zoom land, I wish you a wonderful week. You'll come back next week, same time, Wednesday, 12:30. So you will shut down now, and then we'll take questions from the audience over here. Okay. Any questions in the room? Questions? As long as it's not about the elections, it's okay. We're taking no questions on the elections in the room. This is a free political zone. Okay.
There's a delay in the Facebook, so I have to wait a few seconds for it to go all the way through.
Sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
If the laws of kosher and non-kosher wasn't given, how did you not know